I mean, the participants can't video?
No, Alexander? We'll wait a few minutes as the participants join. So we've got 30 people so far. People are trickling in this morning. Room for plenty. Good morning to everyone joining us, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We'll wait just 30 minutes or 30 seconds more, get the stragglers in. A couple of people saying hi in the chat.
Can I see the chat or can only you see the chat?
We've got a hi from Mark Hutchins, from Frederique. Hello back to you all. Perfect. So I will kick things off as those people come in. I wanted to get things started and being mindful of time. So my name is Sarah Howard, and I'm pleased to welcome everyone to this webinar with Alexi Cashin from Elenteny Imports and Alexandra Beck from Speakeasy Company. I'm an account supervisor at Colangelo and Partners. Colangelo is the leading wine and spirits agency in the United States. We represent a diverse portfolio of accounts, including regional and national institutions, such as Wines from Spain, Wines from South Africa, Chianti Classico. We also represent individual wine, beer, and spirits brands, as well as Elenteny Imports, which is one of my clients. So with that, I will introduce everyone to the CEO of Elenteny Imports, Alexi Cashin.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. So we put together an informative webinar today about the topic of selling alcohol direct to consumers. Sort of the backstory of why this all came together is that during the pandemic last year, as many of you know, Elenteny Imports customers are by and large US importers. And I heard from many of you, import customers of ours, who called and said, Alexi, we're just trying to eke out sales any way we can. Is there some service that you're offering for direct to consumer? Of course, as we are all bound by tied house regulations, it was not feasible for Elenteny Imports to offer such a service, even though our customers had come to rely on Elenteny for that type of offering. And the conversation continued. It's not just about an importer pivoting to this new sales channel when we're all bound by that same three-tier system and industry regulation. But in addition, I heard lots of concerns from US importers about pivoting, about regulation. And I heard other concerns like, I don't want to upset my retail community, or my core competency is on procuring amazing wines and really building brands for my suppliers and my growers. My competency isn't in digital marketing or direct-to-consumer marketing. Also concerns that I heard were, how much money do I need to invest in this new sales channel? And some Elenteny customers I did watch, they were able to execute direct-to-consumer sales through their own more flexible licensing, for example, in California. And they navigated that retail community concern by selling maybe just certain products from their portfolio or branding their DTC offering completely differently. But in addition to a couple of importers sort of trying that on their own, I did start talking to as many other companies, services about DTC service, mostly I'm sure many of you are aware, they fall within the logistical kind of back end side of fulfilling consumer sales. Different third-party logistics efforts, pick pack facilities that are, again, a little more focused on the actual end shipments and the logistical side. But those conversations didn't really touch on the concerns that I had originally heard from our import customers about branding, about digital marketing, and ultimately about licensing. And then I learned about Speakeasy, and I got to know the founder and CEO, Josh Jacobs, who's going to join us today for the Q&A portion. And I was honored to host him on the Alexi Cashin podcast. So I learned a lot more about Josh and a lot more about Speakeasy, and that led to today's webinar. So I would love to pass the mic over to Alex Beck, who's the Vice President of Partnerships at Speakeasy, who has a great presentation for us today. And at the end of that presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A. So welcome, Alex.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Beck, and I'm the VP of Partnerships at Speakeasy. I want to, of course, first thank Alexi and Elenteny for hosting this webinar, and of course, thank all of you for attending. So today, I'm going to address the following questions with regards to Speakeasy. I'll give you a look at why e-commerce is so imperative for beverage brands, how our DTC model differs from some marketplace models out there, how we can stay 3-tier compliant, and of course, the benefits of utilizing the Speakeasy service. Then we'll have Q&A, as Alexi mentioned, and of course, I'll provide my contact information for you to stay in touch after the presentation.
And also, Alex, too, just as a matter of housekeeping, if you do have questions as you're listening to Alex's presentation, just go ahead and put them into the chat, and then Sarah from Colangelo is going to coalesce them all, and we'll tackle them at the end.
Perfect. So I want to start off with some statistics. 80% of US beverage alcohol consumption was at home prior to COVID. The closures, coupled with people being more used to being at home, will accelerate a trend that was already in place, and that's at-home consumption. Here's another really powerful one. Nearly 1 million more cases of wine were shipped in the first half of 2020 compared to 2019, which equates to an additional $222 million spent by consumers to have wine delivered to their doors. Now, with on-premise slowed and the trends toward at-home consumption accelerating, imported wine brands are certainly at a disadvantage. Domestic wineries, of course, can leverage their own DTC licensing, which gives them the benefit of not having to rely on distributors and retailers, and has allowed them a route to market through online sales. Alternatively, importers are still privy to the regulations of the 3-tier system, and thus face more challenges when scaling and getting product to their consumers. I'd like to share more details on Speakeasy. So essentially, we are a technology and logistics solution that provides suppliers and importers the ability to sell direct to consumers on their own websites while still being 3-tier compliant. Our e-commerce platform is built to help brands like yourselves step up, take control over your own growth, and compete in the US market. As we all know, beverage alcohol is a very specific industry with a very challenging regulatory landscape. So I want to just start by backing up a tiny bit. I want to talk a little bit more about the problems that many wine and spirits brands in our industry face, and how we at Speakeasy have come up with a solution to help suppliers scale their brands through e-commerce. So let's start with the problem, which of course I know is no secret to anyone here. There are a lot of challenges that importers face when trying to scale. First, the 3-tier system. Even prior to COVID, the 3-tier system was very difficult to navigate. Of course, we know that it takes time and resources to manage a distributor network as well as build retail penetration. Most suppliers and importers don't have the resources to be able to employ their own feet on the street teams in order to hit the streets, activate, and build distribution alongside their wholesalers. And further, now with COVID, on and off premise accounts have had have much less bandwidth and are more risk averse. So selling in new products has become increasingly more difficult. If you are successful in building your retail distribution, we know that suppliers lose control and lack visibility into who their consumers really are. Suppliers have little to no say in retail pricing, shelf placement, product descriptions, and many other aspects of their brand's image during a consumer shopping experience. And these problems still exist when we talk about selling online through a third-party marketplace or online retailer. So on the left here, you have a photo from wine.com, but there are other marketplace models such as Drizzly, Reserve Bar, Minibar, or online liquor stores. So with wine.com or others, it's really as if somebody's walking into a liquor store. There are competitive products for sale, and in that retailer in this case, wine.com actually owns the consumer. So once wine.com sees that the consumer has clicked on, in this scenario, Domainot, they're suggesting other brands down at the bottom of the page, which may distract the consumer and ultimately lead the consumer to purchase something they weren't originally planning to purchase. Even if the consumer ends up purchasing the Domainot, wine.com now has that consumer information and can retarget that consumer at any point with other competitive product promotions. By sending consumers to online retailers, you're effectively building up their e-commerce business and not your own. So on the right, however, you'll actually see the Speakeasy model, which is a direct-to-consumer model, which allows the consumer to check out while still on the supplier website. No redirecting, no competitive products, and no loss of control. As an importer, you want to convey the story behind your portfolio and each individual brand, the heritage, the history, and why each bottle is so special. Most of that brand story is actually going to get lost in the three-tier system, sort of like a game of telephone. Even though you may spend a lot of time and attention with your distributors on training, it's rare that that full story actually makes it to the consumer. So wouldn't it be incredible if you could have that direct conversation with your consumers and tell your brand stories just like your producers might in their tasting rooms? Well, you can. So direct-to-consumer sales, and more specifically Speakeasy, aims to give you that ability. When you're able to provide a direct-to-consumer e-commerce experience, you as the importer are finally able to have that one-on-one relationship with your consumers. You'll be able to take advantage of digital channels such as Instagram and Facebook to build your suppliers' brands in a strategic way by actually creating demand online. Once you're driving traffic to your website for consumers to purchase, Speakeasy can handle getting that product to your consumer's front door, regardless of where you have wholesale or retail distribution. A huge benefit of direct-to-consumer sales is the control. So when the transaction actually takes place on your brand website through Speakeasy, you get to maintain control over the entire shopping journey, including the branding, the messaging, the pricing, and even the packaging. So how does it work? In order to achieve this direct-to-consumer shopping experience, in terms of technology, Speakeasy actually builds a storefront using your digital assets. That could be your fonts, your colors, your bottle shots, your logo. And we build a storefront onto a brand website or maybe an importer's portfolio website. This is one of our live websites. It's 21 Seeds Tequila. And you'll see the homepage on the left. As soon as the consumer actually clicks that buy online button, it will take the consumer to shop21seeds.com, which is the Speakeasy hosted storefront. It still looks like the rest of the 21 Seeds website. And from here, a consumer can view your products and proceed to checkout. This is the second half of the checkout process. So of course, they'll be able to see each product description if you have awards that you want to share with your consumer, and then ultimately they will proceed throughout the checkout process. Now, from a logistics perspective, Speakeasy actually takes over from here. While this looks and feels like a direct-to-consumer sale for the consumer, everything, of course, is still 3-tier compliant. All of the product will pass through your California distributor and then will be funneled through a retail partner we work with outside Los Angeles. Instead of operating out of that brick and mortar retail store, though, we're actually operating out of a full-service, state-of-the-art 3PL warehouse. From there, the product still falls under the retail license, but the Speakeasy team will manage the inventory and do all of the picking, packing, and shipping once orders come in through your online store. From our centralized warehouse in California, we can ship spirits and beer to 30 states, which gives you access to about 250 million Americans, regardless, again, of where you have retail and wholesale distribution. And at this time, we can also ship wine to 46 different states. So our centralized warehouse location is really what sets us apart from some of the other e-commerce solutions. We don't need to rely on a network of fragmented retailers. We're actually able to maintain control over the entire fulfillment process, including pricing, packaging, quality assurance, and of course, the unboxing experience. So unlike traditional retailers, we're able to fulfill merchandise and accessories, send point of sale materials, and run discounts and promotions, ultimately allowing for you to set your products apart from others, to build a loyal consumer base, and to scale your business. For those of your producers which have tasting rooms abroad, or even events happening in the US, here's a really easy way to convert those visits to sales. If you have US consumers in the tasting room asking where to get the product, instead of directing them to a local store when they get back home, why not have your producer set up an iPad right there in the tasting room so that consumers can order on the spot, and then that wine product will meet them at home. Similarly, with events, you can really optimize your ROI by collecting orders right there at the event through your online store. Most importantly, and vastly different from when you sell through a retailer, you'll be able to finally gain visibility into exactly who your consumers are, where they're shopping from, and what motivates them to purchase. Through Google Analytics, we'll be able to give you data on your consumers' demographic breakdown, geographic breakdown, and behavioral information. Additionally, you'll be able to see transactional information for any consumers who complete the checkout process. For example, if you post on Instagram now, of course you can see how many likes your post gets. However, if you need to redirect your consumer away from your website to a retailer, either online or in person, you lose visibility into how many of those consumers who actually liked your Instagram post ultimately went to the retailer and purchased. However, with Speakeasy's technology solution, the transaction is occurring on your website, and so you can see who actually checks out, what they purchased, and how much they spent. Now, you can see your exact ROI on any marketing activity, and of course, streamline your strategy to optimize that marketing spend. This is really key information when you're looking to scale your on and off premise business as well. It can actually help your field team to know which zip codes or areas to target based on online demand. It can give them insight into which products are selling and to who, and it can actually help them to build a case for why retailers and various distributors should carry and feature your products. Additionally, We will give you some more specific consumer information, such as email addresses, phone numbers, etc., to utilize for further retargeting. You'll be able to continue the digital conversation with your consumers, letting them know about new vintages, new varietals, and updates on your suppliers or your portfolio. You can offer discounts, promos, and keep your consumers engaged through mailers to build an actual loyal consumer base. So I want to share one of our case studies with you. This is from a distillery based in Florida that we work with. And you'll see in 12 months, they sold almost $500,000 worth of product with an average order value of $146. They sold almost 8,000 bottles to 3,000 unique consumers. While this solution does require you to invest in marketing and PR resources to actually drive traffic to your website and build awareness around your portfolio, there's tremendous potential for tangible return on your investment in the growth of your business, not only online, but in the on and off premise as well. Another really exciting development we had this year was the launch of Tesla Tequila, a new project to the US. With the help of digital channels, we were able to sell tens of thousands of bottles in just several hours. And this was done without any actual marketing activity. It trickled out on the internet, and it was all pretty much word of mouth through the internet. And it was very incredible. Of course, this is a unique scenario, but really just proves how powerful e-commerce can be in creating an efficient and quick route to market. E-commerce in our industry and Speakeasy has seen tremendous growth amidst changing consumer purchase behavior and trends. I'm thrilled to say that we are now close to supporting 200 different wine, spirits, beer, and ready-to-drink brands on our platform, and saw growth through November and December of 464% year over year. Additionally, we outsold January 2020 in just the first 5 days of 2021. This really confirms that e-commerce has truly emerged as the third channel. Similar to how you build your on-premise strategy and your off-premise strategy for each of your suppliers' products, you should now be thinking about your approach to online sales for an integrated, holistic brand strategy. In addition to being present on back bars, wine lists, and retail shelves, how are you driving traffic to your website? How are you leveraging digital channels? And what are you doing to continue the conversation with your consumers directly? So I'm going to stop there and pass it back to Alexi, but of course I would love to connect with each of you in the near future to discuss our solution in more detail and to learn more about each of you and your brands. My contact information is listed here. Please feel free to reach out. Let me know if you'd like to set up a call. And you can also look at our website, which is speakeasyco.com for more information.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. We've got a host of really great questions. And then Josh, great. Hi, welcome. So yeah, let me just start at the top of these questions. The first one is, what is the tech that you use to build the website? Kind of a general question, but maybe Speakeasy, you can speak to kind of how the technology works with the actual e-commerce site.
Sure. So we're going to, as I mentioned, collect your digital assets. So we'll ask for some fonts, some colors, your bottle shots, if you have a banner you want to put across the top of the page. And then we actually use Magento to build, it's a templated solution for our standard shopping cart. And ultimately, the only thing that you need to do as the supplier is go ahead and add a shop now button or a buy now button to your landing page that's ultimately going to link to this subdomain that we're building.
And Alex, the question wasn't asked specifically like this, but I know that it's certainly one Josh and I discussed in our podcast interview. But what if somebody already has their own e-commerce site?
So I guess it depends on, what that e-commerce site is actually powering. A lot of our brands have, for example, e-commerce sites that are powering UK. And so what we would recommend in that scenario, if you're splitting it up by geography, then you could have perhaps a drop down that says shop US, shop UK, and you separate your consumers out like that, depending on where they're actually shipping to. Same thing if you have a merchandise store that you want to keep, but you want to ultimately allow for consumers to purchase product on your website. You can have, a shop wine button or shop merchandise button. And then ultimately, if you are, let's say, able to ship in specific states, but not others, and you want Speakeasy to handle those other states for you, again, you want to have some sort of way to filter the consumers by where they're actually shipping to. So perhaps you could do a drop down of, or selection of which state they're in, and then funnel the consumers accordingly.
Awesome. Next question is, do you have other retail partners outside of California?
Right now, we're just operating out of California. And so, of course, I mentioned the benefit of actually having that centralized warehouse location. The idea is that we want to, of course, maintain control over the product the entire time. We really don't want to be farming out orders to various retailers all over the country. With that said, however, we do have strategic initiatives to open up new warehouses on the East Coast as well as other parts of the country coming soon, I'll say. And really the idea there is to be able to stay true to the idea of our model, of course, have that state-of-the-art warehouse, but also we understand, shipping cost and shipping time is always a concern.
Yes, there's probably a good concentration of folks on this webinar who are East Coast based. So I understand the nature of that question for sure. Next one is, what's the margin taken at each level? What is the pricing model? How much control of pricing and promotions do we have?
So in terms of your relationship with your distributor and the distributor margin, of course, that's going to vary. And that's completely between you and your wholesale partner in California. And then what Speakeasy has worked out is a reduced margin at the retail level. And so we actually have an agreement with our retail partner where they take a smaller than traditional retail margin. And so ultimately the idea here is to be able to give you as the brand a little bit more margin enhancement so that you can reinvest back into your e-commerce solution. So we have a lot of brands utilizing their extra margin potentially to run promos and discounts, to subsidize some of their consumer shipping costs, because we do understand that shipping costs may be expensive. And then also we have brands that are using that enhanced margin to run digital advertising.
Awesome. So the other question is just with regards to California sales. Is there the ability to be able to ship to Southern California, for example, if your warehouse is in Northern California on demand? So maybe this is a little bit more specific around where you're warehoused.
So our warehouse is in Southern California, just east of Los Angeles. We're not at this point doing any on-demand delivery, so everything will actually be shipped out of the warehouse. Our transit times to California are fairly quick. And so you're looking at, somewhere between 2 and 5 days, depending on which day of the week you actually place that order.
Great. So there's sort of a myriad of questions just about licensing. And so kind of like, who's the license party? How is Speakeasy able to do this while remaining compliant? Anyway, there's sort of a smattering of questions that are sort of in that general realm. So maybe you can just speak to that in general. And one also more specific, it looks like it's a question of how are you able to ship to that many states when wine.com's website says otherwise, which is probably the slide that you showed, Alex, about the spirits sales map versus wine. Anyhow, maybe you could articulate that topic as a whole. There's a lot of questions there.
Perfect. I'll jump in. This is Josh. And Alexi, thanks. This is the first time I've had an opportunity. Thank you for hosting us. Pleasure to meet everyone on the line. In terms of licensing, as long as your product is available in distribution in California, then we're good to go and ship wine, specifically 46 states, and spirits to 30 states. So as long as your product is available to purchase by retailers in California, then we're good to go for our platform. We're agnostic, as Alex mentioned, when it comes to distribution. And California is one of the quickest and easiest states to get registered in if you're not actively being sold today. In terms of interstate compliance, we have a pretty unique approach when it comes to shipping. We've developed what we've coined the agency model with our law firm. And it's not actually the retailer shipping. The consumer is purchasing from the retailer in California via Speakeasy acting as an agent, and title is transferring from the retailer to the consumer. And then the consumer is moving their own goods around the country. Again, Speakeasy acting as that conduit, as that agent to get product around. So you probably are accustomed to wine.com's states that they can service just based on where retailers can access, where we're actually looking at where can consumers move their own goods. So it's a pretty unique approach, and we're happy to dive into more detail on that, probably easiest offline. And Alex and I are here to set up additional conversations to dive a little bit deeper. I know we won't be able to get as into the weeds on this conversation.
Okay, great. Couple of other logistics questions too. Can you ship temp controlled throughout the year? And what are the various carriers that are relied on with Speakeasy to facilitate those consumer deliveries?
So yes, we can ship wine temperature controlled. We also have temperature control in our warehouse. And then in terms of carriers, it varies by product type. And so for wine, we're using primarily FedEx, UPS, as well as GSO for the West Coast. And then for our spirits products, we are using a network of private truckers and regional carriers for the most part to do all of our deliveries for us. And so those private truckers will actually take the product out of California in full pallets, move it to a state or the surrounding state where that consumer is waiting for the shipment, and then of course do the last mile delivery via a regional carrier, which is going to include the adult signature as well as the ID check.
Great. I'm going to try to dovetail these two together. So I'm a distributor in Illinois and wondering if you have solutions for distributors, not importers. It's a great question, and also one that I feel like can be answered with a prior question, which was, is my California distributor going to take margin in this? So I think it all depends on what your current selling relationship is like in California. For Elenteny imports customers that use our distribution services, you're obviously set up to sell through our California distribution service here in the state of California. For those of you that aren't Elenteny customers using that service, again, it would just be, I think, a matter of what your current selling distribution partner looks like today in California. But the sort of short answer to the question of, I'm an Illinois distributor, I'm not an importer, how do I get from point A to point B? If you don't already have an existing California partner, you can certainly reach out to me. We could discuss what's available in terms of fulfilling the wholesale sales to Speakeasy, which is something that Elenteny certainly can do. There's another question here, Alex, on just some of the tax details and reporting. So since these orders are technically going through the 3-tier system, are the reports available for suppliers to pull data on invoices for their monthly state reporting? This dovetails with another question that speaks to the remittance of that sales, retail, and alcohol excise taxes.
So in terms of excise taxes and anything that as a supplier, you're going to have to report back to the government, that will all be handled with you and your distributor. So really Speakeasy's role is we have, our retail partner that is purchasing from you through the distributor, same as any other retailer would. And so you'll see your depletions from that retail license, the same as any other retailer you're working with in California. In terms of sales tax for the consumer, we are collecting California state sales tax on every order.
Sorry, I said excise tax. I'm in the wholesale state of mind most of the time. Great. So another question about data security. So if a brand collects email addresses and other personal information on their customers, is that data ever used to market for Speakeasy or other products?
Great question. So in our contract, you'll see that all of our partners' data is protected and isolated. And that's one of the major advantages in working with Speakeasy as opposed to wine.com. As Alex mentioned, when you drive traffic to wine.com, they truly own that consumer and they're going to continue to remarket to that individual, not just your products as the brand that drove that consumer there, but all of the products in their portfolio. Where with Speakeasy, our partners own that data, they and they alone. And Speakeasy, we don't even have our own marketplace at this juncture. So there's no ability for us to really remarket to these consumers. And at this time, we don't share, nor will we ever share our partners' data with each other or resell it in any fashion.
Good to know. Let's see, I'm trying to scroll through here. The producers direct to consumer. So this question is about, is it possible for producers to sell direct to consumer? I guess this means like separate from the importer being involved in this. This question is, I own a business which sells, I'm wondering if this is an option with regards to licensing. I guess where this is where the producer again is kind of selling direct to consumer. Again, I think Speakeasy, since you work with many brands sort of in a siphoned relationship, what's the answer there?
Right, so that's exactly it, Alexi. We would be able to work with, either a portfolio like an importer or just the brand directly. And so a lot of our current clients are craft distilleries that are domestic, and we're working with those brands. And then ultimately for imports and larger portfolios, those brands have a choice either to, build something on the actual brand website, the brand specific website, or for the importer to go ahead and build some sort of portfolio site where you're showing all of your different producers all on one website.
Great.
Did that answer?
Yeah, I think so. I think, obviously if that producer has sort of no entrance into the US, we'd have to kind of go back to the basics with, how to get product into the US sort of on that first tier, which is obviously something that Elenteny Imports can help those interested parties. So this is a question that I alluded to in the introduction and sort of my personal exploration and talking to many of our customers at Elenteny Imports. but Alex and Josh, perhaps you can both help me if I leave something out here. But the question is, we're a wine importer yet to launch D2C. How do your customers go about launching without cannibalizing their distribution and wholesale business? Specifically, why would a local wine shop work with us when we advertise that customers can just buy it directly from our website? So I have encountered lots of questions about that. And to be frank, I don't have an answer. To engage in direct to consumer sales for an importer would need to be a decision that you as a business would be interested in partaking in. And there might be all sorts of different reasons or scenarios where that works. I have a couple of examples of customers of ours who have, tried their hand at this by, wanting to sell DTC, perhaps just a subset of their portfolio. So maybe things that are here stateside, but aren't selling through, or your distribution partners aren't buying or taking a position on, either because of the pandemic or because of just inventory and demand planning and just challenges with inventory management, which we're all too familiar with. It could be that you're launching a different category of alcohol. So for example, an importer that's very practiced in wine, but now you're trying your hand in spirits, or ciders or cold brews, just other types or categories of alcohol that you actually don't have current distribution partners that have picked up those products. So it could be a way to, again, permitting that all the compliance and the letters of appointment. There was a question about that. I mean, of course, your suppliers need to appoint you in the correct states, as is required always. But let's say you had a new brand that you have the letter of appointment to distribute in your home state, for example. And maybe you haven't shown it to other distributors outside of your home state distribution market and want to sort of help test the waters or build up that brand, or to test it into different markets sort of before appointing a distribution partner. So it could be a way to sort of play with different brands before they enter a market with you as the appointed importer for that brand. Also, I have heard from importers that, yes, they're concerned about cannibalizing, as you said, their relationships with retailers. And yet I think the challenging times that we experienced in 2020, certainly made it a level playing field for people to try and garner as many sales as they possibly could in tough times. I don't think that's anyway, all to say that there's lots of different stories and narratives that I've heard from importers about why they would try this, why it might make sense. And that it might not make sense for every product in their portfolio, and it might not make sense in every state that they endeavor to sell to. Anything, Alex or Josh, on that?
I'll just add that, I think that's absolutely correct, Alexi. There are different sort of strategies for each producer, each brand. Ultimately, if it's a brand where you're coming to the US market and you want to start to collect all of that data, e-commerce can be a really powerful tool just for your proof of concept. And I mentioned, collecting data, collecting names and zip codes of where your consumers are buying, and then actually taking that to local retailers and saying, look how many people in your market are purchasing this product, and you should really have, it on your shelf. And so those types of things are really beneficial. The idea of e-commerce is not to cannibalize your relationships, and not really even to pull volume away from on and off premise. So the idea here is really that it's a third channel intended to help you grow your business. And so we're actually talking about incremental sales here. And so of course, if you have, 10 really great retailers in a specific city that are carrying your product, and people are of course going to that retailer, maybe there's a consumer that lives too far away from any of the retailers, but might love your product, right? And they see it online and they want to try it. And now they're going to continue purchasing from you, whereas they might never have tried the product because it's not at their local liquor store. And so that's really the sort of power of this in terms of giving you just additional reach so that you can build your brand alongside your on and off premise strategies.
Awesome. So we're coming up to the top of the hour, and it looks like some folks are peeling off. I'll try to condense a few more questions just to squeeze these in, but just want to reiterate that I'm definitely open and available. This slide has my email address to answer just sort of general questions on the Elenteny side, and then of course reaching out to Speakeasy directly to learn more of these like very nuts and bolts. Alex and Josh, this audience is clearly very detail oriented and very versed in the logistics world. But so there's some questions here about, does the inventory need to be in your LA or in your California warehouse to sell? And to that end, are there minimums involved or par levels sold per month?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Great questions around inventory. And just due to the transit times and in the Amazon era, we're all trying to compete with next day or 2-day shipping. So we do require inventory on hand at all times. We don't have a minimum level of inventory. The one factor to consider is our monthly subscription. So while we don't have minimum sales or a minimum amount of par levels, we do have a monthly subscription. It's $3.99 a month. So it's not necessarily going to break the bank. But if you're only considering having a case or two at the warehouse, will that justify the monthly subscription cost? Oftentimes the answer is no. So typically our partners are warehousing a pretty significant amount of product. And as Alex mentioned, building a robust digital strategy to support this. E-premise, you have on and off premise, now we have e-premise, is a whole new sales channel to explore and utilize. That case study we shared with one of our small craft distillery partners generating $500,000 in sales. And we expect them to significantly surpass that this year. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as larger and savvier partners continue to get into e-commerce. Really, the sky's the limit. It presents an opportunity for lean scalability as opposed to opening up one mom and pop retail store at a time.
Great. Excellent. And there's a question about consumers, if they wanted to, order just a bottle or two, or do you work with different formats, bottles, large bottles, cans, boxes?
Yeah, all of the above.
Awesome. Well, great. I feel like we've gone through a chunk of questions, definitely covered a good host of information. Another question was, will we be sending out this presentation via email? So we'll definitely follow up with all of you who joined. Thank you so much. I wanted to just bring Sarah Howard back on as well, who again, if you have other questions and you're curious about working on a marketing strategy or just talking about this from just in general e-commerce efforts, Sarah is a great resource and has been really valued to Elenteny Imports in recent months. So thank you for putting this together. Sarah and Alex for your presentation, and Josh, again, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to know a little bit more about Speakeasy. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Please do not hesitate to follow up with questions. We are, we'll be waiting on our inboxes to hear from all of you.
Awesome.
All right, everyone, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everyone.